Hey SEOs and content marketers, say goodbye to crazy spreadsheet mashups and experience unprecedented connectivity between your SEO planning and reporting data. Introducing Audience Key, technology for keyword mapping, content brief automation, and rank tracking that form an SEO strategy system providing unparalleled feedback loops between planning, reporting, and optimization activities. Put your time and energy into strategy, not data upkeep. Visit audiencekey.com and apply for a free trial today.
Hey everyone, welcome to Webcology on WMR.fm. It's the 28th of September, 2023. One shopping week till my birthday, incidentally. I'll be like 11:55 as of 1 week from now. This is Jim Hedger from Digital Always Media, Kristine Schachinger from Sites Without Walls, and we're going to have a really fun one today. We're joined by Eryk Salvaggio. He's the founder of the Algorithmic Resistance Research Group, a loose knit collection of artists, activists, and researchers who use AI to understand and critique AI. He's coming up in a few minutes. It's going to be a really fun interview. Totally looking forward to it. But first, a couple Google things, a couple Twitter things, some OpenAI things, and Google Bard things. First of all, finally, once and for all, as of 3 a.m. Eastern this morning, the helpful content update is done, rolled out, and let the whining begin.
It's already begun. Hey, everybody. Yeah, apparently there's a lot of people that have been not happy with Google. It feels like a lot of people who didn't suffer through Penguin and Panda back in the day are getting their first taste of a super aggressive algorithm devaluation.
Well, this is a super aggressive algorithm. I'm not sure it's a devaluation. Again, search is a zero-sum game, eh? So if somebody gets promoted, you get
Oh, sure, but they're not complaining.
Indeed,
they got promoted. They're not complaining. So the ones complaining are the ones that got superly demoted, like 90%.
Super happy, humble brag. You don't hear me complaining. But my websites have followed the basic advice, I dare say, that we've been giving here on Webcology, which is keep it simple, make it really easy. The helpful content update was written for a reason, to push website or webmasters into making content for users, not for Google's algorithms. Don't try to tick all the boxes, like I was saying earlier this week. That's bad SEO. But opening your content, making your website accessible, making the website usable, fast, and giving a good user experience, that's also a form of helpful content. Content isn't just images and text and video. It's also experience from Google's point of view. So I know I'm quite happy right now, but yeah, I've been reading so much angst and anger out there that people are demanding Google roll it back.
Yeah, well, I can say the search results right now are really, really horrible. Like I'm getting so much irrelevancy, but that started before the HCU. Like I'm getting stuff from 1995 showing up in searches, so it's very bad right now. But it's like when Penguin came out, people now just think it was links, but actually at the time it was about anything pretty much black hat. So over optimization was a big thing. And it kind of sounds like this may have a little tinge of Penguin from back in the day in that aspect. Because I hear people are yelling at John, you give us advice to do this stuff and we did it and now we're being penalized for it. Not that it's penalty because that's a manual action, but you know what I'm saying. So, but yeah, so people are definitely not happy. And also, I did see people that have AI content sites. They got hit as well. So not all of them, but some people like who had a stack of them. Like yeah, about half of mine got hit really hard. So yeah, you got to make it useful, but also I always want to be careful though, saying like just make it for users because there are requirements Google has for how you put together your site and your content and all that stuff. So you have to follow what Google tells you, but you also have to make sure your content's good for users first. So.
Well, indeed. You have to build your bicycle or car to conform to the standards of the road as well. That's just
Exactly.
sort of how it works. But if you can do that, you can make a vehicle to get people from point A to point B to point Z and back again. Um, okay, so what we do know, and Kristine, I owe you an apology for last show. You were absolutely right. This is an algorithm that can affect you for months on end, and there's a sandbox.
Yep.
So shortly after last week's show, I went and looked it up and found that exact document I asked you to send me. So all
Yeah.
apologies. You were absolutely right.
Jim went and found it because Kristine had COVID and was very, very sick. So
If
yeah,
um,
yeah.
if you
So
found that your content has been devalued, or somebody else's content has been revalued above yours, you might be in the doghouse for a month, 2 months, or more. Because even after you fix the content, Google's constantly churning. This algorithm isn't done. It may have finished, been rolling out, and been injected into the system, but now it's everflux. It's going to be constantly rolling and considering websites against the um, elements and factors that new elements and factors in this algo and in the helpful algo. So even though Google's still rescoring your website over and over and over again against all other relevant websites, it might take you 2 or 3 months because they want to see you change your content to make it again more helpful to users, but they want to see that it sticks. So you can't just change your content, get out of the doghouse, get your good rankings back again, and then maybe degrade the content experience. Google wants to see it last for a few months before it reassigns the placements you used to have.
yeah, and so people, if they're not aware, the helpful content update is applied to your site based on the amount of content that Google found not helpful. They're not very clear on what not helpful means, but so that means if they found, say, 10% of your pages not helpful, it is a site-wide devaluation, but you will only experience a small drop. Now, small could be 30%, but it won't be 90%. But if they found 90, 100% of your content, or even above maybe 50%, to be not helpful, you might show an 80 to 90% drop. So, and those are just rough estimates. Not Google said 80, 90%, but
What is this?
yeah.
So Google can say they did a proportional response?
Yes, yeah, it's
How,
proportional. Yeah.
Christine,
So
where do you hide a dead body? On
on,
page 2 of search results. Nobody will find it there.
exactly, exactly.
Proportional
Well, now
response, right?
so the good thing about this one though is like the core update's hard, right? Because I do a lot of core update recovery, and the core update could be any of the core ranking signals, and there's a lot of them. And then you have to analyze the site, and you have to find out where things dropped, and you have to see what's wrong, and blah 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 blah. In this case, it's your content, like your content. They don't like it, and you go and find which pages drop the most because those are most likely the ones that they really hate, and then go look at how you wrote that content. Go to the helpful content guidelines. They actually have a guideline and a ranking system, which is awesome because like when we got Penguin like a decade ago, we didn't have like any Google Docs to tell us what to do. And they tell you what to check for. So check for those things and then rewrite your content and have a human write your content. Do not use AI. Because if your content, whether it was human or AI written the first time, wasn't good enough to make it through this update, your AI content isn't going to be the thing. John, over and over and over again for the last month, has been making comments about AI content just being rehashed and how it's a weight on your site and how it's a dead weight on your site. It's like Michael Phelps with a 50-pound weight and expecting him to win the Olympics. So if you have an HCU, the good thing is it's easy to diagnose and it's easy-ish to fix. We don't exactly know what they're looking for, but we know that the content you have isn't it. So then go to the guidelines and add what you don't have.
Okay, so speaking of advice, Google ain't gonna stop giving it. Um, even if many people who receive it misinterpret it and go ready off the short end of a long or the long end of a short pier.
That was funny. Stop giving us advice.
Eh? Um, for real. In Twitter X or Twixter, some SEOs are so frustrated by the helpful content update that they're actually telling Google, "Screw you! You gave us this advice. Now what?" Um, for newer SEOs, this has been going on for years like this. It's just
Yeah.
normal.
And the quote that got John to say something was, I think it's Egadzooks.
Yes.
Ethan Mertz to John said it is somewhat amusing that the made for Google content has become an issue at Google, as if you all weren't the primary driving force. Well, I agree, a little self-reflection wouldn't hurt. And Sean's like, yes, it's also a little awkward that we're writing how to do well in Google, explaining algorithms, giving technical tips. But even with that, a minority that abuses that, it doesn't mean we should stop helping sites get the most out of search. Sometimes we forget the web is more than MFA. And you and I both think that means what again?
Made for AdSense. I think it's got to be made for AdSense.
Yeah. But it's like anything. It's like back when Penguin came out, people got hit for over optimizing, keyword stuffing and too many internal links, things like that. And so it sounds like there might be some similar components in this one where you made your content an artificial and your site artificial, not helpful.
Okay, we got a couple more stories to go through, a little bit on Twixtor and a little bit on AI, but we have Eryk Salvaggio from the Algorithmic Resistance Research Group waiting in the waiting room. So want to get through fast. We're moving into the 2024 elections. I'm pretty sure Eryk's going to have a little bit to say on the potential of major deepfakes gumming up the electoral process, especially like through social media. And what does the intrepid leader of Twixtor, Twitter X, Twixtor?
I like Twixtor.
This week, Elon Musk has fired the entire election integrity team ahead of the 2024 election. Furthermore, X/Twitter has scrapped the feature that lets users report misleading information. Happy election season, eh?
Yeah, and not just our elections. There are 40 elections they were monitoring, and the one in Australia that's coming up. So this isn't just U.S. elections. This is around the world. And apparently the right-wing accounts like Libs of TikTok were pressuring Musk to fire Roderick. I'm not sure I'm saying his name right. Roderick, the lawyer who was putting the team together for the election integrity team. And so he fired him. And so now there is nobody watching election integrity at Twixtor. I really like Twixtor. I think that should be the new name.
For as long as the platform stays aloft, certainly. That's I don't know what to say about that. That's we saw what happened in 2016 and 2020, and we've seen what's happened with just the rampant disinformation in our electoral and social systems. It's
bad. It's really bad. And Twitter actually came out this week in a new report as being the worst for disinformation out of all the platforms by far. Like last time it was like, by a little, but no, this time it was like by far. Yeah.
Okay. Really quickly, a couple things on AI before we get like our actual AI expert can begin to talk to us about AI.
Yes,
OpenAI connected again. ChatGPT relaunches Browse with Bing this time. Better than ever because they're respecting robots' text protocols.
Yeah. There's a lot of sites now blocking not just OpenAI, but Common Crawl, which is out of Europe and one of the main databases. So I tried to post all of them in a LinkedIn post, and I ran out of characters to take a bunch out. So there's a huge number of sites that are now blocking them. But so OpenAI is connected to the web again. The reason they disconnected it last time is through Bing is because people were using it to bypass paywalls. I have a feeling they don't know what they're in for, because you and I both know that the ones that are going to be trying to break it are the affiliate gaming people or the casino people, and we'll see if they manage to do that, because white on white text works in OpenAI, at least it did last time before they cut it off. So
well, if I'm blocking through robots text, then assumably the AI bot is just avoiding my website altogether. It comes at the domain level, sees a robot text, it says, "Oh, I'm not welcome here," and buggers off. Except we know that both Bing and Google, their regular search bots, while they respect robots text, kind of, sort of, they also are absolutely adamant do it at the page level. If you're going to block us at page level to guarantee it.
Yeah.
And I really wish OpenAI and Bard and Anthropic and et al. would offer a meta tag, a simple, a simple no index, no follow tag. Do not come here. Now, that's not to say, I think it's going to be a really interesting debate moving forward about who should and should not allow access.
Yeah, just to name a few right now that are blocking GPT bot: Amazon Core, New York Times, The Guardian, Shutterstock, WikiHow, CNN, Science Direct, USA Today, Healthline, Scribed, WebMD, Business Insider, Dictionary, Reuters, Washington Post, NPR, CBS News, and it goes on and on and on. So there's a lot of especially news sites, but I understand that because people are telling ChatGPT to write in the style of certain authors, and then they're creating books and putting them on Amazon and selling them.
Yep.
So yeah, so there is really good reasons. I haven't found a really good reason yet, and we can ask Eryk this, to let it do your site, because a lot of people in our industry will say, well, because I want my it mentioned, or I wanted this, and it's like, but it's not a search engine. So
No, like, you know what?
yeah.
I can tell you one good reason. And this actually came from a guest we had a couple of weeks ago. And it made a lot of sense to me. If I'm writing original content that's in my voice, if I'm writing news content, or if I'm writing proprietary content, I absolutely do not want AI training on that content. But say I write a manual for activists on how to canvass your neighborhood. I don't care if I make any money off this manual. I
Oh,
just
that's
want
true.
people to
Yeah.
build better communities. And moreover, given information that's out there that will be available to the AI, I know that mine is pure of heart. I definitely want it to be informing what's going to be informing others in this aspect. But if it's something that, like, is paying my bills, or that is my proprietary gig, like my own personal writing style, I do not want AI to be able to replicate that, because I've worked for years to create that.
Exactly. There was an author who spent 20 years writing a book that was then used in training, and then people used it to write books for in the style of that author, and then put the name on it and put it on Amazon. And they're very angry because they spent 20 years developing the writing and the logic and the style and everything, and now that's all been ripped off. And so definitely, I think if you do have real authorship, proprietary voices, you definitely don't want it training on your stuff, so that they can just be replicated in the style of. So I think you're right. Yeah, but I agree. If you have something like what you're talking about, you might want that. I hate to say information, because it's not information retrieval. It's just training it on the best patterns to return.
Sure. But if you got
But
something that explains why the sky is blue, that you have
yeah,
no real attachment to, I'm not making money off this, but the sky is blue because of reflection of light off. I got no problem with AI training on that.
right.
Given the myth science it's going to be training on, you know.
I am going to be fascinated, though. In our industry, the black hatters,
Oh yeah.
those are the ones that are going to be breaking it, and fast. And so it'll be interesting to see like how they do that. So we'll find out in a month or so, I'm sure.
Actually, you know what? We might find out in a moment or so, because while we're talking about ethics and what you can and cannot do with AI, and where these boundaries are to begin with, maybe we ought to talk with somebody who's actually pushed a lot of them.
I think that's a good idea.
Eryk Salvaggio is an artist and researcher who's used generative techniques to create music with mushrooms. Okay.
I love
As
that.
well
I
as
love that.
music, images, and videos, always aimed at exploring and subverting the logic of emerging technologies. Linking art making to research, Salvaggio sees creative exploration as a form of ethical hacking, a way of understanding complex systems in ways that are more broadly accessible. He's founder and organizer of AARG the Algorithmic Resistance Research Group, a loose-knit collection of artists, activists, and researchers who use AI to critique and understand artificial intelligence. Incidentally, I took that bio straight off of the Algorithmic Resistance Research Group, just like AI would have done for me had I asked it to. Eryk, thank you for joining us, and welcome to Webcology.
ARRG.
Hi, thanks.
ARRG indeed. I guess that's the acronym. What is ARRG?
Yes, it's ARRG, ARRG, always with that exclamation mark. And the exclamation mark can stand for whatever anyone wants. We are, as you described, it's a loose-knit group of artists and researchers and activists. And it kind of started from looking around when this generative art stuff started hitting the mainstream. We were kind of seeing a lot of this work that was just kind of using it exactly as was intended. It was kind of running it off. These things don't have instruction manuals, but a lot of people were just kind of using them to create images and sharing them. And this was all great and wonderful. And I think there's some beautiful images, and a lot of people have found some space for creativity in that. But we really were thinking, there's a lot going on behind these scenes of these pictures and how they're made. And we don't exactly agree with that. And we really wanted to think about ourselves as artists who were using these as tools to talk about some of those issues, talk about some of those ethical concerns that we had, and make work that kind of challenged the very nature of these systems. So we started talking to each other, like I said, it's pretty loose, but we found that there was kind of a network of people who are thinking critically about these systems to various extents, right? There are some people who absolutely really don't like them. There are some people who are just kind of critical, want to push the boundaries of them and see what they can do, but want to think about the ethics. And we kind of came together and started saying, let's start making work that can push the boundaries, push this conversation into the mainstream using art and making art on our own terms, as opposed to what these systems are kind of built and designed to do. So we call it creative misuse. We go into the systems and we figure out what are some ways to kind of mess with them. None of it is really nefarious, though certainly if someone's out there that has a nefarious purpose, we're interested in talking to you. Can't say that we would agree or sign up, but I'd just be curious to know what you're doing. But we're kind of pushing it aesthetically. Like, what are the pictures that we can make without, undermining things or making dangerous products or making these products into something dangerous, right? We're thinking ethically, and we're just trying to be creative in a different way.
Just to confirm, first off, you're an instructor or a professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology, so you're not a techno-Luddite, right? You're not trying to smash the machine.
Well, the Luddites had an interesting point. The Luddites were basically saying, let's negotiate the way these technologies are deployed. And to that extent, I would say, yes, I am a Luddite. Because I do think people should have a say in what these technologies do and how they come into our lives. So I am kind of interested in pushing back. I am not, advocating for a complete return to sort of 1600s agrarianism. We don't all need farms, though certainly it could be nice. I like fresh tomatoes as much as anyone else. But really what I would advocate for is, let's have these conversations and include more people in these conversations around the ways that these technologies get sort of handed to us as if they're a given. So yeah, Luddite maybe.
Well, let's get to the very, very beginning. And if you can give it just a really short, basic explanation, how do AI image models work? How does generative art or generative images, how are they created?
Sure. Yeah. So by coincidence, I just finished a class on this subject, introducing students to diffusion models and generative AI. And one of the things I find really helpful is to orient people and say, basically, imagine you're on a camping trip, which is usually not where technical explanations of AI systems start. But imagine you're at a camping trip and you've got this beautiful clear sky and there's all these stars up overhead, and you're looking and you're gazing at the stars, and someone who's with you says, oh, look, it's the Big Dipper. And you look up and you can't quite see the Big Dipper, right? But then they're telling you, no, it's right there, it's right there. And you say, oh, yeah, there it is, there's the Big Dipper. And you see it because you were told that it was there. Mm-hmm. These systems are doing that, but they're doing it with a JPEG that is just absolute noise. So it starts with this chaotic explosion of pixels, and it starts looking for the patterns that you tell it are there. So is it a flower? If you tell it, here's a flower, it's going to look at this noise, and it's going to try to trace a really basic outline of a flower in the noise based on these 5 billion images that it's seen online with a text description that says flowers, right?
So it literally starts with everything. Everything has been taught on, it sees, and it's trying to figure its way through based on how you've prompted.
How you prompt it. Your prompting is kind of steering it through this flotsam of debris, of image debris, in a vast sea. Some people might say it's like the garbage islands, but it's all the images that we make, that humans make. It's not everything. It's just what's sampled by this data set called Leon 5B, which is out there. And that is these images with their text descriptions. And it breaks these images down into noise, and it remembers how that noise came about and the basic shapes that survived the noisier they got. So like flowers is a great example. These are these bright, bold petal stems, right? Bright red leaves or petals. And you can imagine this noise breaking the image down, but those red petals, because they're so dense, they kind of stay. They stay longer than something really kind of minor, like a minor detail, like even like the little stem on a rose. So the stem on a rose is going to disappear as you add noise or subtract information. But those petals stay, and that becomes this basic shape that it can sort of generalize from. And so when you ask it for a flower, it has this rough idea, and I call it a stereotype, and I think that's an important thing to remember, that it's kind of a stereotype of a flower or a cat. And then it's regenerating that image from that mental model that it has of this rough contour of the shape of billions of flowers or billions of cats.
Okay, so I'm a artist. I'm a painter. I make work that hangs in a gallery and hopefully sells to an institution or a collector. They pay money to that gallery. The gallery pays me. I buy a sandwich and pay my rent.
Yes. Congrats.
Okay, so there I need a limited, rather exclusive audience to make a living. Now, I'm a webmaster. When I put something online, my very first thought is I want as many people in the world as possible to see it. I want to make it unlimited access.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know why I would create a painting in this day and age if it was just going to go into the corpus of generative image creation, of the knowledge that the generative AI is training on, and be part of other creations, AI creations. Is this going to limit people sharing their art or opening their art? Is there a way you can keep your art out of? I mean, there's a zillion questions that come from that concept.
Yeah. Is there a robots.txt for art?
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a great question, and it's one of the core questions we're asking about, because if you're an artist and you're making these paintings and you're uploading them to your website, you're actually building a data set. And I don't know if anyone here has ever built a data set, but it is a pain, right? Collecting data, putting that data together, labeling that data, all of that stuff is a massive pain. And this is why these companies are kind of just grabbing it from the web, right? They don't want to build a data set of 5 billion images. They don't want to take 5 billion photographs of 100 million things. So as an artist, as you described, sharing becomes pretty risky, because you're building this data set, you're not being compensated. And yes, on the one hand, these images are going in alongside billions of images. And it's like this old thing they used to say about voting, right? One vote doesn't count, but 100 million one votes count. It's like that with the data set. One person's paintings is not going to make a huge difference, but without everybody's paintings, you don't have any sense of what painting looks like in these models. And so I think it is really important, if we want to encourage an open web where people feel comfortable about sharing things, that we do start having conversations about things like data rights. Like, if I upload something, am I giving it away? You shouldn't have to feel like you are. And data rights is a missing piece of the conversation. We talk a lot about copyright, but what about data rights? What about sharing poetry or the things we write online? Why is that suddenly up for grabs? So there are tools, to get to your specific question. There are some people working on tools that allow you to actually make it so that when the machine looks at your image and starts breaking it down into noise, it only sees Van Gogh paintings, which I think is really funny.
Okay.
That's called Glaze, if you want to look it up.
Oh, Glaze, yes, I know
yeah.
Glaze.
And there's also things like, on the user end, being able to go into a data set and say, don't use my images. Spawning has a tool that they're working on with Stable Diffusion that you can go in and say that. And even DALL-E 3, which was just announced, has an on-site opt-out option. The problem with these is you got to know that it's out there. You have to know that AI is even doing this with your images, right? So it's not really accessible for everyone right now. And so there's still some critiques to come of it.
So how do you get the conversation going? How do you, I mean, when AI was introduced publicly back in November 2022, nobody wanted to talk. They just wanted to play.
Absolutely.
How do you get them talking about their rights, their the implications towards the future, creative copyright, etc.?
So that's one of the nice things about making AI art that is kind of adversarial to AI art, is that it really confuses people. And they come up, and I joke that I often speak to audiences that start with their arms crossed, waiting for me to say the thing that lets them know that I'm on their side or against them. And when you are presenting AI art that is actually critical of AI, their arms untangle and they start saying, like, what? What are you talking about? How does this make sense? And that's a great opportunity. And we're not hostile to people who use these things, right? We are people who use these things, but we are also asking those questions, and those things are not mutually exclusive. And so hopefully, if people are coming up and they're saying, like, the stuff you're making is really cool, how do you do it? We start having those conversations that actually the way I do it is by thinking about the parts of the system that I think are unethical, that I want to avoid, and then designing ways of making art that avoids that. And that opens up the conversation to say, we have a choice in the way we use these things, and we can navigate and negotiate the way we use these things on our own. And I think just starting from that place and letting people set their own terms is a really helpful place to start.
Well, I mean, one could argue the easiest way to avoid AI in art is to avoid using AI in art. Does I mean, you can get to the really subjective question: does this like help or limit one's creativity? I imagine it does both at the same time. But the thing that interests me is how artists feel about competing with or working in the same environment as AI generated or AI enhanced art. Earlier this year, an AI enhanced image, or I think an AI generated image, won a major art competition. How's that going to affect, again, in a world that is interested in playing before talking, how do you think it's going to affect image and people's relationships with imagery and art moving into the future?
Well, one of the things I hope it does is encourage people to think about process and to think about creativity, not just as having an image that has been made, because you can make a lot of these images. And ultimately, I find it kind of unsatisfying because they're creating these images and you don't really have a lot of control over them. There are a lot of people who say the prompt negotiates, you know, they can think about prompts all day. But ultimately, you're kind of getting random images, and you can shape that and you can steer that, and there's some fun to be had with that. But it is that process of that thinking about your own relationship to creativity and what you're learning through the struggle of making something. Um, Drawing is kind of the go-to for making art, right? Like, and I actually have never been someone who drew. I've always used computers. But to me, it's about getting into a flow state, getting into figuring out what I'm trying to make and how to make the image that is in my head or the express the idea that's in my head, as opposed to saying, what happens if I do this, seeing something and choosing it. And I think we can ask complicated questions about what creativity is and what we want it to be and what we want to learn through the process of creativity. Is it rewarding to get an image, right? Or is it actually more rewarding to go in and take pieces of these generated images and tear certain parts of them out and paste them together in Photoshop and just mess with them, right? How do we get our hands dirty with this as like a raw material as opposed to a finished product? And that's, I think, the illusion that these things create by making such beautiful images is like, you're done, you finished this. But actually, to me, it's like, this is the starting point. Now we get these beautiful images to start from, and we get to rip them up and make something with them, as opposed to saying, well, look, we've made something. So I think it's about that position of how are we creative? What does it mean to be creative? And I think ultimately generating images and seeing those beautiful images, it gets boring after a while. And I think people are going to look for that additional level of challenge. And I don't begrudge anyone who's starting out and making these pictures and being amazed at what they can make. I see this just today with my students as they got their hands on these tools. It's really cool, right? But after a couple months, it kind of loses its charm and you start asking, well, what can I do next? And that's where the fun really starts. And that's where the creative expression really begins too, I think. And I think more people are going to start seeing that for themselves. I hope so anyway.
You know, it's something that I found fascinating about what you said because, well, two things. One, I love to do photography, landscape photography. So I don't think anyone wants an AI generated image of the Grand Canyon. So I think I'm safe there. But when you talk about the struggle of creativity, so I went to art school and, you know, when you are putting something, so I do out of the found is what I call it. So I put on music and I just throw things on the paper or whatever. And I'd look for images in it that my brain saw, and then I'd render them out. But there's always this point when I would get halfway through and I'd be like, oh, I hate this so much. It's so awful. It's so bad. And I would stop and I would like throw it away. And then one time I was on deadline and I couldn't do that. I had to work through it. I had to push through it. And I pushed through all night and I get done. And it's something that I never even thought would come out of it. And also there was part of me in it. So when I put it up in art school, you have to put everything on the wall and they have people evaluate it at the end of the class, right? And people were seeing things in it that actually were things I was struggling with personally that I didn't realize I was struggling with personally. So it come out in the art and that struggle. So I think you're right. Because when people ask me, like, Kristine, it's the same as like when you were in art school and you just like, you studied all the artists and then you just kind of mimic them. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Right. You had such a great explanation there. It's really that process of flow. And if people don't know what flow is, it means you just get into the moment. There is no sense of time. You have to keep going until you get to the resolution point. And then you're done. And you know, that's the hardest thing as an artist, to know when you're done. And you stop. And then you've created something, which is not the same as putting a bunch of words together in a prompt and having the AI create an image. So I think that's a great way to express the difference, that it's the struggle of the creativity and the flow and everything that comes together. It's like something's flowing through you as you create in art school. And every art school person will tell you that. And then when you get done at the end, it's something more than you thought it could be, or different than you thought it could be. So I love that example. I think that's a great example of the difference between creative process and prompts that create images. So I didn't really have a question there. I just really thinking that was just a really awesome way to describe it. So
no, I totally get that.
That does sort of prompt a question for me though, and actually a little bit of a concern. We are very influenced by arts around us. We know what we know what a meth kingpin looks like because we know what Walter White looks like. We know what a mysterious smile looks like because we can see the Mona Lisa in the back of our head. I can think of Vermeer's Girl with Pearl and how that has affected art over the years, including the gorgeous Black Girl with Pearl. Now, that's what makes me think about bias in artificial intelligence. And then for some reason, it always seems to produce some form of bias, either the information it trained on or the way it learns to see information. Is there a concern about bias? I don't want to use the word prejudicing, but altering people's perception of imagery moving into the future?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you raised the question, because this is really one of the key concerns of the group too, is thinking about something really fundamental to algorithms and how diffusion models work, is that they have to generalize. And a generalization is a stereotype, right? There's distinctions, right? You could stereotype an apple. That doesn't cause any problems. But if you ask it the same system that is making an apple based on pictures that have been labeled apple, and you ask it about a criminal, right? What is it drawing from there? If one of the classic examples, and folks might know this because it was a Google search issue, was around the search term Black girls. And if anyone knows Sophia Noble, they know that Sophia Noble went in. She used to do SEO. She's an academic now and has done some great work. And she found that if you searched on Google for this search term, Black girls, you got pornography, right? Sorry, sensitive ears, but that's what you got. And she was shocked and appalled, because a Black girl is like a child, and you are looking for information about the health of children, and you're getting the first page of Google search results was these links to these adult websites. And they had to go in, and Google had to actually go in and manually tweak the way that those algorithm responses came back. And now if you go, you get kind of better information, right? These systems that are trained on unfiltered data from the internet are using those exact same things that Google was doing. And so you get the same results. And if you look at Leon and you look at the underlying training data for that exact term, you will see, and I had to do this, had the mistake, I didn't do it live, thank God, but I had made the mistake of going in there in order to show the data to my students that was trained on this term. And I found, even though the adult content filter was on, it was still pornographic. And so that's what's going on when you generate an image using that term. And that's not the only one, right? There's so many of these, because these machines are built to generalize on an unfiltered corpus of data from, of all places, the internet. And the internet is not a pretty place at times. So
Indeed.
we are trying to raise that and make people aware that when they generate these images, they have some responsibility. And that's a key thing. You know, if you're making movies, or you're writing books, or doing video games, or anything you design where a human is thinking about it, right? You think about the ethics and how you're representing people. And you try to do that carefully. Nobody wants to see stereotypical characters. No one wants to see racism and this kind of stuff, right? The algorithm can't do that. And these companies are trying as hard as they can. Well, I hope they are. They're not always trying that hard, let's be blunt. They are, some of them are doing more than others to intervene. Not all of them are doing so, and the tools that they're developing are not quite enough. And so we need to think about what this means, not just for generative AI, but for all kinds of algorithmic systems. Whenever we put algorithmic systems into positions of representing people, or making decisions on behalf of people, we're really opening up a can of worms, because we're kind of factoring in a lot of the worst human impulses into that data, and the result is going to reflect that. And the systems themselves can reflect that. That's important too. In a lot of ways, it's really not about fixing data. It's really about how the model processes any data you give it, is going to ultimately end up generalizing and stereotyping. So we have to be careful about both sides of that.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
So one of the big claims when ChatGPT came out last year was that it had solved the Nazi problem.
Mm.
And the Nazi problem, I'm sure you know, but for people who don't know, is a problem in machine learning where it learns on the worst of humanity, and it says anti-Semitic or hateful things or racist things. And so they we found out later, a lot of people in, I think it was Kenya, for $2 a day or $2 an hour.
Yeah.
You go through the data and scrub it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But text is easier. So do they do that with images that they train on, or how do they do that with images? How would they?
Could they do that?
Could they do that? Yeah.
There's a variety of different ways that they're trying. OpenAI did a very interesting thing where they do set parameters on what you can prompt, and they will also it's been shown that they will inject words into your prompt in order to diversify them. Because for a while, if you were asking for professor, you got people who looked like me, white guys with beards in lab coats for whatever reason. I don't wear a lab coat, but that's part of what you got back. And so when people started noticing this, they also started noticing that if you asked for person holding a sign, the sign would be a person holding a sign, and there would be words on the sign. And this was how they tested it, to see what words were being injected into the prompts. Now, obviously, if you've used OpenAI's DALL-E 2, you know that the text doesn't come through 100%, but you could sort of tell it was injecting words into people's prompts. And as a result, the feedback was more diverse. So you got women in the professors, you got people of different skin tones in the professor feedback, right? So that was one of the things they were doing. But they were also making a lot of subjective choices. And so one of the weird things that I found in some of my art experiments was you could generate images of men kissing men, but you could not generate pictures of women kissing women. And this is interesting to me, why they drew the boundary there. But also interesting is that they would weight contextualization. So if you use the prompt contemplate the universe, picture of women kissing women, it would generate women kissing women, but in this like weird starlit space situation. And so what happens is, even if you ask for people kissing, you will get women kissing women. But if you ask for women kissing women, it flags that as potentially flagged content. But men kissing men isn't. And so there's a lot of subjective questions to ask about who's making those decisions and why is that the decision that they have made. Whether or not you agree with it, I do not, but you can certainly ask, why one and not the other? Or why not both, or why neither, right? There's questions you can ask about who's making these decisions and how they're making these decisions. So yeah, there's other examples too, but I think those are the interesting ones.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I didn't know they were adding text on the way in. I know they filter on the way out, but that's fascinating. So when they say like the billion parameters, part of that is adding text to diversify on the prompt that you give it that you don't actually see, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I call them system level interventions. That's where you type in something and they are doing something as a response, or they're blocking you from seeing something on the response. And I've actually made pieces out of these system level interventions. So Stable Diffusion will blur images it thinks are pornographic. And so I would just ask for like literally abstract noise, but put a word like sensual in it. And it would respond with these like the color, like sensual, stereotypically sensual colors, like pinks and purples and like flowing shapes, but they were all abstractions, but it would still blur them as if they were pornographic. And I've made sort of slow motion movies that are called like machine learning eroticism. So just to raise those types of questions about how are they filtering this and where are they drawing boundaries on things like that.
That's fascinating.
While half our audience is feverishly searching for them now using their keyboards, the other half is curious. Where can they see this?
All of my stuff is on cyberneticforests.com. That's my website. And you can see a lot of the work there, including the most recent exhibition of ARRG, which was at DEF CON 31 at the AI Village. And there's also an upcoming call for participation. If anyone's interested in playing with this, we're going to put out a zine of tricks and methods and art projects that you can make that are kind of circumventing or misusing algorithms in fun and creative ways. So
Ooh,
all of that
count
is
me
on the
in.
website.
Count
Well,
me in.
that actually comes close to the next question I was going to ask. You did present at DEF CON 31 late last month. So ARRG obviously gets around and goes out and tries to get conversation at conferences and in public. Is ARRG going to be appearing at other conferences in the near future?
We hope so. At the moment, we are funded out of pocket, and we are open. If anyone out there is interested in changing that, we are certainly excited to hear from you. And so even the zine that we're putting together is meant to kind of go to lots of different places and bring a lot of different people in. But we are trying to find people who might be interested in supporting our work. And if we can do that, we'll find more things that we can do. But we're certainly open to opportunities and talking and exhibitions and all of that. So nothing on the agenda after the zine, but we hope to keep the conversations going.
Between now and then, how do interested people get a hold of you or find out more about ARRG? Where should they go to?
That would be the website, cyberneticforest.com. The first thing that they'll see there right now is that DEF CON exhibition, and there's info about contacting us and reaching out to us there. And if you want to participate in the zine, it's cyberneticforest.com/zine. And there's a little form you can fill out if you have ideas or want to get in touch. You can just fill out the form.
Oh, fun. I found the sensitive noise. Sensual.
There you go.
There you go. So the essential images. Go ahead, don't start.
I guess I have a last question, and this may well be the most important and hardest one to answer.
All right.
Is resistance futile?
No, look at the WGA, right? They are proof that technology comes into our lives through friction, right? We introduce technologies. It's not just top down. It's not just tech companies giving us things. We get to say, we don't like the way this thing works. We want to change it. We want to set certain boundaries on it. And I think resistance is absolutely not futile. And it also isn't harmful to innovation. It just shapes innovation. It's a way of saying, what about the rest of us, right? We can say no to things until they kind of work with us and until we can set our own boundaries. And I think that's really important to remember. And I'm so excited to see what's come out of the writer's strike and the kind of things that they've negotiated. It's really interesting to see just the way things go with technology when people organize themselves and start to say publicly, we want a certain set of things. And really, that's how technology should work. If we want technology to work for everybody, then everyone's voice should be a part of the conversation. And so I really don't think resistance is futile. I think resistance is part and always has been part of the way we build technology. We just tend to forget it because when things work and they work the way we want them to, we forget that anyone had to fight for that. But we do. So hopefully people continue to resist.
Eryk Salvaggio, Rochester Institute of Technology professor and Algorithmic Resistance Research Group founder and organizer. Thank you so much for joining us in Webcology. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. We've gone probably just over our full hour. We're gonna have to hope to invite you back again and again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for the chat. It was great talking.
Thank you, Eryk. I learned a lot today.
Thank you.
Friends, that was Eryk Salvaggio. He's again the founder and organizer of ARRG, the Algorithmic Resistance Research Group. Type that into Google, look them up, check out their message, and more importantly, check out the conversation that they're trying to check out and think about the conversation they're trying to generate. Maybe you want to take part in it yourself by getting involved with ARRG, or maybe you want to take part in it yourself just by having the conversation with your friends and other creators. Kristine, we're done. We gotta get out of here. There's another show coming up right behind us in the studio. That was fun, eh?
It was fun, and I did learn a lot today. I thought I knew a bit about the how all that worked, but there's a lot I did not know, so it was great, and I hope our listeners find it as interesting. I think they will.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm sure
Yeah.
they are. It's a fun adventure. Anyway, until next week, which incidentally is my 55th birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. This is Jim Hedger from Digital Always Media on behalf of Kristine Schachinger from Sites Without Walls. You've been listening to Webcology, recorded live to podcast on the 28th of September 2023. Stay well, rank well, be kind to each other, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everybody.